Hi everyone, welcome back to another SimplePlanes video. In this video, I'm going to be adding more screens to the SWL-120's flight management computer, and I'm also going to be adding the input system. So, let's get started. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make a page, for example, the setup page, and then I'm going to make the input system for that page. Now I can't just make all the pages at once and then put the input system in. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make, say, the setup page, and then I'm going to make the input system for that page, so they can click buttons and enable or disable these mod airports. And then I'm going to make, say, the waypoint pages, and I'm going to use the enabled or disabled state of this page to have the waypoints being shown or hidden. It's hard to really explain in a way that makes perfect clear sense, but I might as well just go ahead and make this, and then I'll show you the results.
A few minutes later.
So quite a bit has happened, and I'm going to explain what I've had to do to allow for the input system. The first thing you'll notice is there's an extra label here. This is because I'm completely redesigning the layout of all the different pages. Previously, all of the pages were just written out in one go here. So for, let's say, the page with the 11th value, which is the climb page, I just had, if the page is 11, display all of this text, otherwise display nothing, and that's how all these different pages are displayed. The problem with doing this is if I want to have any form of input system, or any form of dynamic text really, then I need to have more quotes. So say in this page, which is the ACOS page, I want to have some extra dynamic text. So say, I'm just going to pick some, this doesn't exist, but I'm just going to say test equals 1. Yes, display test, otherwise display nothing. This will not work inside that page, ignoring the fact this variable doesn't exist. So say this variable does exist, this still wouldn't work because I have an expression inside an expression. I mean, that will completely break the code. So instead, what I've set up, and it's hard to really see it, but every single line, instead of just the 5 lines that make up the page, or 6 lines, every single line has code per page. So, for example, on the setup page, I haven't actually done the waypoints page, but just for the setup page, we'll even use that. It's here. So on the setup page, on the left side, there is text which is always displayed on that page. And that is what I have here. So if it's 20, display Caper, which is that airport there, and then display nothing if it's not 20. So that's just the left side of the second line. And then this is for the right side. And this is sort of like a stacked multi-selector code, which is pretty much, if it's not 20, display nothing. Otherwise, run a second part of the selector code, which says, if this variable is 0, then display disabled. If it's anything else, then display enabled. It's hard to really explain in a way that makes sense, but basically I had to redesign the entire label. I've also designed a way for the character multi-selector code to work. So instead of having a multi-selector for every single variable in the FMC, like the RMC, I have a single multi-selector code for 6 characters per line, like per side of line, which changes what it's reading from based on what page you're on. So if you're on, say, the flight plan page, and we're talking about the line 2A, which is the second line, and it's the left side of that line, which is where the origin would display, then this multi-selector code displays squares if there's nothing in it, or characters if there's something in it. But if you're on, what's another page? I guess the flight plans page. If you're on that page, then it will display dashes or characters. So basically, it changes the variable it's reading from based on what page you're on, instead of having 2 different sets of code for those 2 different pages. And I'll show you what this actually looks like. So on the setup page, and this is the label which I'm working on, not this label. You can see all the mod airports, and I had to change this from the one on the flowchart because I couldn't fit all those characters in the label, so I just had to put Caper instead of Caper Town. Then when you click the buttons, it changes to enabled or disabled. The platform is a similar idea. In the backhand side of the code, it's the exact same idea as one of the other mod airports. I just display it differently here so it makes more sense. So again, all this does is essentially just disables the computer waypoints. I haven't done the waypoint page yet, because I just wanted to pause what I was doing to talk about what I had to do. And I guess I'll show you the back end again. So these are the variables which run that enabled or disabled state. And what this code is doing essentially for each button. So this is the button here for Caper Airport. It's this button here, and it has an output value of 40. And what this code here, the FMC 2004 loop is, if the current page is 20, and the select option is 40, then have this code plus 1. Otherwise, just have this variable. And what this does is it adds 1 to this variable whenever you're on this page, which is this page, and you click this button. Then I have another variable, which just repeats the output of this variable, which gets me a 0 or a 1, which is enabled or disabled. So disabled is 0, that's enabled, but I'm looking at this one. So that's 0, and enabled is 1. It's the same idea for the other 3, and for the platform, mobile is 0 or off, and computer is on or 1. And then I have one final variable, which is essentially, I'm just going to show you this table here. So I have 4 different airports. Each of those airports can be 0 or 1. So now I need to know how many possible configurations I can have. So say if I have Caper enabled and Zinshan disabled, and the Mabel is enabled or computer's disabled, what number is that? What happens if you enable Zinshan? Essentially, I have a different number for every single possible configuration of these 4 different airports. Well, the computer's not an airport, but I'm just going to call it an airport. And it turned out that I have 16 possible configurations. And so I wrote some code in here. It's actually quite a bit of code. Try to really get the scale, but actually, if I turn on word wrap, this is that line of code. It's a pretty long line of code. And essentially, it detects every single configuration, and then it's like, if this configuration is true, then output 0. Otherwise, run this configuration if that's true, and then output 1, and so on until I have 16 different configurations. And so this variable outputs a number, which I can use to tell me what configuration I'm in. So if I debug that expression, fmc mod config, then it'll output a number based on what configuration I have this in. And then I can use this number to show what waypoints I have. And this is the part that I'm just going to work on now. It's going to be quite complicated, because while I can just hide or show these different pages, I need to make pages change based on what waypoints are enabled. So if the Zinshan waypoints are disabled, everything else is enabled, then the Mabel airport's waypoints need to go in here. Actually, I've been going about this all wrong. What if I instead have a different page for each of the mod airports? Because that will actually make it so I have technically less pages I have to code in. It's hard to really explain, but I'll just go ahead and make it, and then I'll show you.
12 seconds later.
Well, I did that. It's pretty simple to explain what I did. Like, you can just click things, you can like enable things, and then those enabled waypoints show up in here. You can click things and then they'll show up. However, explaining how I did it is quite complicated. There's a bit of code involved. And if I turn on word wrap, yep, quite a bit of code. There's also a lot of notes. I added notes so future me can actually understand what past me was writing. I'm not going to try and explain how all of this works. And I'm just going to say the final idea is you have your different supported mods which you can enable. And then based on what's enabled, certain pages will become available for use in the waypoint management page. And then you can view them. That's really all you can do here. You can just view waypoints. then you can click next page and previous pages. Again, really quite simple to use, but it's very difficult to code. And with that, that brings this video to an end. I know I wanted to make the input system work, but I've again run out of time. But there's nothing else I have to do now before the input system, so that's what I'll be doing in my next video, which will be basically for every single page that has input boxes, make those input boxes actually work. So when I type something, like any string, and click on an input box, then it will actually go into that instead of just doing nothing. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!